Were the keepers of the Eilean Mor Lighthouse abducted by aliens? I don't mean aliens from space, but like aliens from another country. Did they just get fed up and wander off? Stick around and you might just find out the answers to these questions on this episode of Unsolved Mysteries. Solved! Welcome back to the podcast, Truth Finders. I'm your host, Chad Kimmons, PhD in solving unsolved mysteries, as usual. It's another glorious, mysterious Thursday, which means we're going to solve another mystery. Do want to apologize before we get started for last week not having an episode. I recently got a new job and I was packing, and then all of a sudden I started feeling like shit and had to go get tested for COVID-19, and it's just been a hell of a couple of weeks. I did test negative, so don't worry, listeners. I will be around for at least a little while longer. With me again today is Raj Jawa, who joined me, I believe, a few weeks ago. Raj, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Sorry to hear about your experience with COVID, but glad to hear you're negative.
I'll tell you what, it's just an upper respiratory infection, which I get a lot because I'm a smoker, but pray you never have to get tested for COVID, man, because they do a nasal swab in both of your nostrils, and it hurts like a mother. Like, I am a grown-ass man, and I was crying. That's how bad it hurts.
Oh, God. Yeah, no, it sounds... Yeah, I've heard the experiences, and they sound just awful. Ugh. Yeah, I'm fortunate. I'm sorry you had to go through that.
Yeah, I am too, but, you know, at least I'm negative. So, part of me kind of wished that I had actually gotten it just to get it out of the way, you know, but on the other hand... then I would have had to call a bunch of people and almost like finding out you have an STD after having sex with a bunch of people. I'm like, hey, you might want to go get tested. But anyway, so we're back today, and if I'm a little low energy, guys, I apologize, but hopefully next week we'll be back to normal. And in the spirit of just trying not to drag this out with me not feeling well, we're going to have a bit of a short one today. Raj, what do you know about the disappearance at the Eilean Mor Lighthouse?
You know, I'm not familiar with that story. I've not heard. I feel like I've know famous lighthouses, but that's not one I'm familiar with.
All right. Well, let's just dive right in here. So first, a little backstory. Eilean Mor is a small island near the Flannan Islands in the Outer Hebrides off the coast of Scotland. The only thing on this island is a lighthouse, and usually, you know, its inhabitants. Now, the lighthouse was first lit in December of 1899. And about a year later, on December 15th in 1900, there was a ship called the Arctur that was on its way past the lighthouse, and noted in its log that the light didn't seem to be shining very brightly. It was kind of bad weather, and it didn't seem to be shining as bright as it should. Well, on December 26th of that same year, the Hesperus, this is a relief vessel and would take provisions to and from the island. It was captained by James Harvey and carrying Joseph Moore, who was to replace one of the lighthouse keepers situated on the island. They made landfall around noon. Now, typically, there were 3 staff at the lighthouse. Upon arrival, they noticed that something was very, very wrong, because first off, like, the lighthouse keepers would have been able to see them coming, and they usually met them, you know, at the shore, because they were bringing provisions or whatever. But there was nobody there. And they noticed that the flagstaff on the island had no flag on it, which is very peculiar, because there should have been a flag flying at all times. And all of the provision boxes had been left on the landing stage for restocking. You know, like I said, the lighthouse keepers were not there to greet. Now, since they couldn't see anybody, the captain blew the whistle and he set up a flare. There's no response whatsoever. So this is just getting weirder and weirder. And they decided that Joseph Moore was going to launch a little boat from the Hesperus towards the island and be put ashore by himself. When he got there, he found that the entrance gate was closed. He found that the beds were unmade, and the clocks had all stopped. Now, in today's world, the clocks being stopped might seem weird in and of itself, because most of our clocks are, like battery powered. But I think this just means that the clocks hadn't been wound in a while.
Okay.
Which I would say suggests that these people have been gone for at least maybe a day. I don't know how often you'd have to wind a clock back then.
Yeah, it seemed like it was pretty often they were winding clocks.
Yeah, if you watch a movie where they wind clocks, they're always winding them bitches.
Yeah, it's like every night or whatever before they go to bed, I think they wind that clock.
They wind the clock before they go to bed, when they wake up. Just, hey, we just ate lunch.
Pass it down, you wind the clock and my son winded the clock, we just wind the clock.
There's always somebody winding clocks around here. Is that the dog barking? Better wind the clock. But yeah, so like this was really peculiar. So he wound the clocks back up, and he went back to the Hesperus and got 2 more people. They searched everywhere on this island, and they found that lamps had been cleaned and filled, meaning that they were probably about to be used, but they had not been taken. There was no sign of the keepers anywhere on the island. They found oilskins that had been, prepared for bad weather, but again, were just hanging on pegs. They had never been used, and it was just a very eerie, creepy feel, because it wasn't like they didn't even find any bodies or anything. There was just no sign that these guys had even been there, like within the last day or so. Now, the 3 volunteers from the Hesperus, Mor and the 3 volunteers, they decided they were going to stay behind to tend the lighthouse. And Captain Harvey sent a telegram dated 26th of December 1900 that read, "A dreadful accident has happened at Flannan's. The 3 keepers, Ducat, Marshall, and the Occasional, have disappeared from the island. The clocks were stopped, and other signs indicated that the accident must have happened about a week ago. Poor fellows, they must have been blown over the cliffs or drowned trying to secure a crane." So far, what are your thoughts on this? Not like trying to solve this sucker yet, but just what are you thinking?
Well, I was just thinking it's weird how often this happens, especially in the early days. It's the disappearing without a trace kind of is as a common refrain in like Roanoke and all these stories is it's a common theme. So it's interesting. It's interesting.
Yeah, and it does seem to happen a lot, with stories like this. And I think that's what makes them so mysterious and so intriguing, is just, it's like, what the hell happened here? And, there's absolutely no trace of anything, bad having happened, which, there's, which we're about to get into. There was evidence of some pretty heavy bad storms. But like, other than that, it just again, it was kind of peculiar, because if there was a really bad storm that washed them out to sea, why didn't they have their lamps? Why didn't they take the oilskins? Why?
And sign of bodies too. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it just seems like they just wandered off into the night and never came back.
Right. It is. Is that what you were saying about their assumption that they had fallen in trying to secure a crane? Was that the assumption drawn from the storms?
Yeah, that's one of the theories.
Okay.
Which again we'll get into here in just a second. I thought there was one more thing that I was gonna mention. Like I said, this is a bit of a short one. There's not a whole lot of facts on this one, but
interesting.
Well, so like I said, there was evidence of pretty bad storms on the west side of the island. There was a box that had been torn open and stuff had just been strewn everywhere. There was an iron railway. I guess I should have mentioned this. There's an iron railway that led from the lighthouse down to the coast, where they would, take a cart down there and then put their provisions on it from the resupply ship or whatever, and then, push it back up to the lighthouse, kept them from having to carry it. Well, this iron railway was wrenched out of the concrete in certain places, and a rock weighing more than a ton had been displaced, and there was just all kinds of stuff to suggest a really bad storm. Like, there was one cliff face where the turf had been completely ripped away. I think it was like up to 10 feet back from the cliff, you know. So they do know that there was a really bad storm. But like I said, it kind of like the reason that they didn't just automatically go, oh, they got washed out to sea, is because if there was a bad storm, why didn't they take their oilskins and the lamps so that, they'd be more prepared for it? Now, no bodies were ever found. Not on the island, not out in the ocean. They searched for, I want to say they searched for about a month trying to find these guys and found nothing. But there have supposedly been mysterious sightings that resulted in basically the entire nation taking a fascination with this case. Some claims, some of the more outlandish ones, they claim that there was a giant sea serpent that came and snatched them all up, or a giant sea bird, same thing, snatched them up off the island.
Sure.
There were reports that maybe they had been abducted by spies, so maybe they were abducted by aliens from another country. There were stories that they had left willingly to start new lives, or my favorite was this story that they had somehow attracted a boat of ghosts that dragged them all to hell. Now, I'm not sure where that one comes from, but it's my favorite because it's just kind of the funniest.
Perhaps it's regional.
Yeah. Now, the more believable theories include that two of the men were working on the west landing when the waves started coming in. Third guy was up by the lighthouse, noticed this, and went to warn them, but, he had to get so close for them to hear him that they all got washed out to sea. Maybe they were trying to secure equipment, because there was a note that I found in one of the reports I was reading about it, where one of them had been recently fined 5 shillings for losing or damaging some equipment, and the thought was, they went down to kind of risk their lives because they didn't want to lose more equipment and have to pay for it, which, I don't know, to me seems kind of stupid. If there's a bad storm coming in, you can always pay that money back, but if you're dead.
Right. Well, yeah, I guess hindsight though, if you're especially hard up for money, those 5 shillings is like, crap, I don't want to leave that equipment out again, despite the risk. And you don't think anything bad's going to happen to you.
Yeah, I guess that's, yeah. There was also, apparently one of the keepers was a very volatile character, and there was a theory that maybe he and one of the other keepers got into a fight on one of the cliff's edge, and the third guy tried to step in and stop it, and they all went over the edge of the cliff and died. I think that seems a little less likely, personally, just because it just doesn't make sense.
Right? No, it's always a little comical. It's hard to believe any situation where all 3 of them kind of followed the other into this situation. But if they all got swept up, they were all doing one thing, it is possible.
Well, the fight one just strikes me as comical because it's like, hey, I got a bone to pick with you. Okay, but let's not do it here. Let's go do it over by that cliff. Right. All right, I'll meet you at the cliffside in 5 minutes. And the other guy's
there's
like,
a
okay.
storm? Great,
Like, I'll referee, says the third guy. I'm like, I don't know, maybe one of them pulled a shank and he's like, no weapons, and tries to break them up. And I don't know. It's just so dumb to think that they would have been fighting on the edge of a cliff.
Yeah.
Because, they're, by all accounts, none of the guys were really stupid. They were all fairly intelligent, so.
I was going to say, they have this job for a reason.
Right. There was one more, and I thought I had put it in my notes, but I must not have. But I do remember supposedly there was a journal entry by one of the men saying that one of the men, as this storm was approaching, like there was this sense of dread that settled over the island, and like one of the men was praying constantly, and one of the men was always crying, and but like these journal entries were debunked and determined that they had been added after the fact because the one who was supposedly praying was an atheist, and the one who was supposedly crying was just like a tough guy. Like he wouldn't have been crying because of a storm. And then you get people going, oh, well, that's what's so weird about it. Like, it's, you know, it's kind of paranormal. This storm was so bad, it made him cry and it turned him religious. And it's like, oh, that's weird, dumb.
Right.
Like, it was debunked. Like, it wasn't even in his handwriting or something like that. So
it's always crazy. People trying to glob on to the interestingness of stories like this.
yeah, as happens, you know. You start out with a very true story, and then through retellings and retellings and retellings, oh, they've been abducted by aliens who took them to a new galaxy. And it's
Right.
like, no, they shot each other.
Sure.
I don't know where you're getting the alien thing. That's about all the information I've got on this one. So why don't you tell me, Raj, what do you think happened here?
I'll tell you although we just said how ridiculous it was, I have to go with what you told me. It feels like aliens. I mean, like I like just given the sheer given the disappearance of it, and you know, the disappearing without a trace, and you know, it's all the classic telltale signs. I mean, it's never aliens, it seems, but I don't have a more reasonable explanation given the information that we have here.
Right. Well, and see what's really weird to me is, you know, they said there were signs of a bad storm, but and I'm not saying it can't happen, but I've never seen a storm so bad that it could move a 1-ton rock and rip rail line out of the ground. So, I mean, something's weird there.
That was odd. When you mentioned I didn't think about the rail line so much, but the boulder absolutely was, because I was thinking like this, if it moved that much stone, I think the lighthouse itself would have been at risk.
Oh yeah. I mean, the only thing I can think is like maybe it was like on the very edge of a hill or something.
Sure.
And maybe some, you know, the rain washed away or eroded away what was underneath it, and then it rolled down. But like the way it was described, it made it sound like the storm itself had, like the wind or something had moved this rock.
Right.
Which I just, you know, without it being a hurricane and they didn't say it was a hurricane, it just said bad storm. So without it being like a hurricane or a tornado or something, I just can't see the wind being strong enough to move a 1-ton rock and rip railways out of the ground.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But I'll tell you, I do. It wasn't aliens.
Okay.
I know what happened. So here's what happened. Have you ever heard of a little guy by the name of Blackbeard?
Oh, yes, of course, yeah.
Okay. Now, Blackbeard would have died a couple centuries before this.
Okay.
But there was a cave underneath the island, and this is not an info dump to try and like, you know, have a gotcha moment. I actually just forgot about this until just this moment. There's a little cave underneath the island, or an inlet underneath this island. And what happened, I believe, is that Blackbeard stored his treasure there. And these keepers, they found it, reported it, and the government of the UK, because I believe back then Scotland was still part of the, you know, British Empire, the British Empire came and murdered them all to keep it a secret. And then they took they wrecked the place up a bit to make it look like it was a storm. And then they took Blackbeard's treasure and, oh no, we haven't seen him. We don't know anything. That's what I think happened. I think there was some MI6 shit going on before MI6 was even a thing.
International espionage, MI4 or something. Yeah, that's, you forget all about all that kind of stuff because that is much more prevalent in centuries past, where there was much more kind of callous acts like that happening.
Man, if I disappear between today's episode and next week's episode, listeners, just keep in mind I was right. It's the only explanation. It's that MI6 was like, he knows too much and came and got me. But yeah, that's my take on it. I mean, just because I don't believe in aliens, so I'm never going to say it's aliens.
No, sure.
So you heard it here first, listeners. It's another mystery down in the books. We've solved the case of the disappearance at the Eilean Mor Lighthouse. And I'd like to thank Raj again for joining me. Is there anything you're working on right now, Raj? Anything that you want to let people know about?
Oh God, I've been staying busy since unfortunately the situation going on. But yeah, I've got my improv, like comedy improv. What do you call it? Freestyle project going on. I got my gamer live streams. I'm trying to do more stuff really, and make this make myself pop.
Cool. Where can people find you at?
Pretty much my website's the easiest. Links to everything. It's rajjawa.com. You can Google me too. That works as well. Yeah, that's the easiest.
All right. Well, thanks again for being here.
Of course. Thanks for having me as always.
And as usual, guys, if you have a mystery you want us to solve here on the podcast, you can send us an email at mysteriessolvedpodcast, all one word, at gmail.com. You can also find us on Facebook at Unsolved Mysteries Solved and on Twitter at UMS_podcast. I believe, Raj, you are at Rajjala, right?
On Twitter, yeah, absolutely.
Alrighty. As always, make sure you don't question us or, we'll have to put you down. So, thanks for listening, guys, and we'll see you next week.
Shut up, man. This is why I don't do these things in person.
Hey folks, Rob here from Fat, Drunk, and Stupid. And what is that, you ask? Well, aside from 3 words that describe my life, it's a podcast. We talk about food, fun, fellowship, movies, books, video games, pop culture, and much more. Also, some very interesting guests and some awesome stories, and of course, some cold beers along the way too. So look us up on Twitter at FDS Podcast 7 and look for Fat, Drunk, and Stupid wherever you find your favorite podcast. Thanks for listening.